There we go. Good morning. Yes, there we are. We're back. Good morning. It's Pastor Brian, PB, and you are here for another episode of PB Reads the Bible. Good to have you with us this morning. It is Wednesday, August 25th. August 25th, and it's 9 a.m. And today is episode 26 on our journey through the book of Romans. Don't know what number it is total, as we've been doing this for 9 months now. And this is our sixth book that we've gone through, and we're almost finished, folks. Almost finished. 26 episodes. We're almost finished. In fact, we're going to finish chapter 13 today. Remember, yesterday we did part of chapter 12 and the first part of chapter 13. So today we're going to finish chapter 13. That means this week we did 2 chapters in 3 days. We gained a day somewhere. We gained a day this week. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to finish up chapter 13. Might do a couple house cleaning things. There's something I wanted to say about the other days that I forgot to say, so I'll touch on that in a moment. But good to see some folks are joining in, and go ahead and check in. Do the romper room roll call. Say hello. Say good morning to me, to each other, all that kind of stuff. Put a comment down in the comment section. Good morning, Colleen. Good to see you joining us this morning. I know a couple folks won't be joining us live. They're going to have to check in. They'll check in later. They'll watch later. Good morning, Pat. Good to see you joining us this morning as well. Great to have you. Now you can also use that comment section. Excuse me. You can use that comment section for a couple of other things as well. You can use it for comments. You can make a comment about something. You can use it to ask questions. Maybe you've got a question about it. You need some clarification, different thoughts, all those kind of things you could put in there. Also, if you had something that you want me to be in prayer about, if there's something that's kind of on your heart today, go ahead and put that in there as well. I'll make sure I keep those in my prayers. And we can, if it's there, then we can share. Everybody can kind of add those to their prayers as well. You can do the same thing with all those same things with texting. If you wanted to send me a text, 570-351-1619. Hello, Cheryl. Hello, Cheryl. So I know I've said this 1,000 times, but well, maybe not quite 1,000, but quite a few. If you see me look to the one side, it's because I'm checking on the computer to see what you're saying on Facebook. And if I look to this side, it's because I'm checking on my cell phone to see what's going on there. See if somebody's what you're sending me that way as well. Announcements. Do I have announcements? I don't think I have any announcements or anything I needed to say this morning. We will have a session tomorrow, of course. That will be chapter 14, or at least the first part of 14. It didn't figure out yet how much we'll need to do tomorrow. Probably only part of it, but it's not a very long chapter, so we'll see. We'll see on that how that goes, and we might take Friday off then, because we're kind of because of this, we're almost ahead of schedule. I think we'll be able to take Friday as a break and then get back to it next week, and probably we should finish Romans next week. So here's the announcement or question for you. Oh, morning, Marilyn. Morning. What do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? I do think we'll probably take a couple days off, perhaps, but if for no other reason, that'll be Labor Day weekend. Give everybody a chance to just rest and refresh again, finish digesting everything we've talked about before moving on to something else. Now, if that's what you want, so if you want a longer break, that's fine. If you think we're done, we've had enough of the Bible for a while, that's fine too. I hope that's not the case though. but I want to hear from you what you might want to do next, assuming we move forward with more of these. Just let me know what you want to do next. And I did hear from one person who said, "Hey, we talk a lot about the prophets, but we haven't spent any time with the prophets." Ooh, okay. They did acknowledge that some would be a little bit long and hard to get through in this fashion. In particular, the book of Isaiah, because that's long. That's 66 chapters of stuff to break down. So then the suggestion was maybe pick one of the smaller ones, one of the shorter ones, like Daniel. I could also perhaps see us doing Micah or one of the lesser known prophets. Although Daniel is good because Daniel is an example. Daniel is a great example of a couple things. A book of prophecy, a book from a prophet. Again, and I should specify, although if we do one, I'll be specifying it then. When we speak of a prophet or a book of prophecy, our ears and minds think foretelling of the future. That's not a good definition of a scriptural prophet. A biblical prophet, a scriptural prophet, a prophet of Israel, didn't necessarily foretell the future. And when they did, it was only short term. They weren't predicting things that were going to take place way far in the future. They were talking about things that were coming right up most of the time when they foretold the future. There's only a couple, some of the messianic prophecies can be read as prophecies of a distant future, but not exactly. They're really just reporting God's promises. But most of the time, the vast majority of the time, a better definition actually of a biblical prophet is someone who speaks with and for God. A prophet is the voice, is a person acting as the voice of God to the time. So Daniel the book of Daniel does fall into that category, but Daniel crosses over into Jewish apocalyptic literature, which is a different animal entirely in some ways, and loaded with symbolism, and shouldn't be read literally. So that's a possibility. Let me know if any of those kind of things, if something like that would interest you, if you think that's where we should go. If not, we can go in a different direction as well. But that's future. We need to talk about today. So today we are turning to chapter 13. We're going to finish chapter 13. Yesterday we read the first part of 13, 1 through 7, and hopefully I demonstrated how it shouldn't be, how it so often is broken away, if for no other reason than because it's got that number 13 rather than 12 in front of it, away from chapter 12, when perhaps and most likely it shouldn't be. It should be read in connection to, because of some of those things. And yes, Paul talks about governing authorities, but he's really not talking about governments so much. It seems like he's really talking more about local officials, local government officials, and in particular magistrates, what we would call district justices, kind of thing, is big part of what he's talking about. So now we're moving on to verse 8. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. Pause. Looking back to verse 7, what was Paul saying in verse 7? Pay to all what is due them: taxes, respect, honor. Now he's saying this is definitely still connected. Owe nothing to anyone. Owe no one anything. So it's reiterating what he just said, but it's expanding it beyond just those government officials, because verse 7 seems to be, because it is connected to verse 6, where he says about paying taxes, and these magistrates are worth their wages. They're doing this job for God. They're some of God's servants, and they need to be paid for it. So make sure you're paying them, pay their taxes, give them respect, give them honor. Now, Paul takes this and sort of expands it to everyone, to the wider community, to everyone. Owe no one anything. Owe no one anything except to love one another. Good morning, Don. I'll play catch up here as I take a breath. And good morning, Marcia, watching from Chelsea Retirement Community. Wonderful. I hope things are going well for your brother. Things are going well for your brother. Okay, so Paul is expanding it now, seems to be anyway. Owe no one anything except to love one another. Now, yes, that idea of owe, it's literal and metaphorical at the same time. It does have a monetary aspect, but it goes beyond money at the same time. And the only exception is to accept to love one another. So in other words, what Paul is saying by putting this right after, owe no one anything except to love one another, means you can never fully pay the debt of love. You can never fully pay the debt of love. You have to keep on loving, no matter what. And again, this is that idea of care and concern, not just emotion, not just emotion or feeling. Thinking of the other at least as much as you think of yourself, and that whole thing. But it's a debt that can never fully be repaid. Now, what debt? Well, we could say maybe he's saying that we're so indebted to God with love that we need to keep acting out in love. That's possible. But it's the idea that we owe love to each other. We owe love to each other, and we can never, ever fully repay that debt. Second half of that verse. See, we're only doing part of a chapter today, but it's going to be a good one. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. And Paul is talking about Torah law. Now, where have we heard that one before, right? Where have we heard that one before? Jesus, very much an echo of what Jesus said in numerous times, several times anyway, in the Gospels, in the biographies of Jesus, speaking about this very thing. When questioned, what's the most important commandment? He says to love. He says to love. The continuing, verse 9, the commandments, in other words, the 10 commandments. Paul doesn't mention all 10 commandments, right? He doesn't verbalize all of them, but he does mention several of them. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment, are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Excuse me, pause. So again, Jesus said the same thing, right? And Paul is not creating this by himself, but he is using something from Scripture. He is using it from Scripture. He's also using Jesus's words to make this statement about love. Paul often gets criticized, and I'm sure I said this before, that he doesn't talk enough about love. Love seems to be the only thing that John wants to talk about, especially in his letters, especially in 1 John, which we went through, right? It's all about love and what that means to live that life of love. Paul doesn't seem to be as hung up on love. He's not as big on love for a lot of people. I think they miss some of it. Love is there in everything that Paul writes about, but he's very specific about it only in certain places. And here is one of them. He bangs the gong of love very loudly in these couple verses. And he says, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. What does he mean by that? He says, well, if if we truly love our neighbor, if you care about your neighbor and are concerned about your neighbor and their needs, then you're not going to do any of the things that would be a violation of Torah. If you truly love and care about your neighbor, you're not going to commit adultery. If you truly love and care about your neighbor, you're not going to commit murder. If you truly love and care about your neighbor, you're not going to be a thief. You're not going to steal. You're not going to do any of those things. If you truly love and care about your neighbor, that's the point he's making. That's of course the point that Jesus made as well. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, which can be troublesome for us if we think that it can. But he's clear that love does no wrong to a neighbor. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. We need to be clear in the last part of verse 10, though. He says, therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law, of Torah. Now, what is Paul saying? Is he saying that Torah obedience and loving your neighbor will provide for Torah obedience, and therefore you will get all your boxes checked and you can provide for your own salvation? Absolutely not, to quote Paul. How many times does he say absolutely not or something like that in his writings, right? He asks those rhetorical questions. That was what I just did. No, that's not what Paul was saying. Not at all. And he's just spent all this book, all this letter, this huge letter, saying Torah obedience, trying to check off the boxes, trying to follow the law, trying to do all that, does not make you right with God. It does not provide for righteousness, for justification, for any of those things. It's not. That's not it. But what has been Paul's point about Torah obedience earlier? That the Jews were called to Torah obedience. For what purpose? For what purpose? The Torah was given and Torah obedience was requested in order to be a light to the Gentiles, in order to point out to the rest of the world and to point the rest of the world towards God. That was what his point was much earlier. And remember what he had said earlier. We're going to go back to earlier a couple times now. What he had said earlier when he talked about their failure to do it caused the rest of the world to laugh and to make heretical statements and to blaspheme God because of Jewish disobedience to Torah. In other words, they did not fulfill Torah. But the new Jew, the new Torah, the new people that God has given the Torah to, in other words, Christians, this new community, by loving your neighbor, you will fulfill the Torah, not check off all the boxes, not follow all the rules, but fulfill the purpose of Torah and be a light to the rest of the world, a light to the nations, to provide for pointing them towards God rather than giving them a reason to blaspheme God. So that this ties back to those much earlier chapters. That was in chapter 3, chapter 2 or 3 is when Paul was talking about that. Now, what I should have said, this reminds me that the other day when we were talking about the first part of chapter 12, and which was about good worship and this idea of spiritual worship, meaning thinking worship and all that. Paul comes back to this idea of this good worship. If we look back to chapter 1, we remember what Paul said was kind of the cause for moral decline and decay and for sin to grow and all that was the fact that people weren't worshiping God, especially not in a right way, and definitely not with this spiritual thinking kind of thing. Okay, so if you need to, you can go back and you can read chapter 1 again to see that people were worshiping the creation rather than the creator kind of thing, which is basically the story of the fall. That's what took place then. So Paul was saying now it's different. And this is so we see that this is still connected back to things that Paul said much earlier. Brilliant writing, of course, brilliant writing. He comes back to it, 9, 10 chapters later, 12 chapters later, to finish making his point. So, continuing, verse 11. Besides this, you know what time it is, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. Pause. I know that's only half a verse, but pause. In Greek, there are two words for time. Chronos and kairos. Chronos is the word from which we get things like chronological. And that's exactly what chronos is. Chronos is watch time, clock time. Chronos is 9:21. Excuse me, right now, as I'm reading this. Might not be for you if you're not watching live, but that's Chronos time. Chronos is August 25th. Kairos time is different. Kairos refers to a special moment in time. Kairos refers to a time on which other things turn and pen. Kairos can be considered a time of decision making. That's what Kairos is, all of those things. So Chronos is August 25th. Chronos is what would make today special or important. We might be able to stretch Kairos anyway to say that, well, today's the first day of school. And so today could be that special moment in time, especially for those students who are entering school for the very first time, or for their first time of their last year of school. So it becomes a special moment. Kairos time can also be thought of as that time, I did say, a time of decision making. You're faced with, do I do this? Do I do that? Do I go to this school? Do I go to that school? Oh boy, I've got 2 job offers. Which one do I go for? That's Kairos. That's Kairos time. And so Paul is saying, you know what Kairos time it is. What a special moment we are in. What a special moment we are in. Continuing, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. Pause. And again, not literally. This is all metaphor. Okay? But this idea of waking from sleep was very prevalent in first century Christianity. We've got a lot of, and we still use the idea of waking from sleep. Part of what Paul is going to say, about the night is ending, the daybreak is about to come. So we have visions of Easter, of first Easter. We have visions of new life, new birth, and it's all tied up into just this little bit of an idea here. It's time for you to wake from sleep, to come alive. That's what Paul is saying. It's time for you to come alive. It's time for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone. The day is near. Let us then lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. End of chapter 13. So Paul's saying, we've got this special time, this special moment in time, and you know what this time is. It's that time to come alive. This goes back to his, remember how he's thinking, and how the culture is thinking at the time, this first century Jewish thought, the second temple, and everything, and the Greek thought too, of ages and of times. And we were living in one age, but Paul is saying, there's the New Age, the second in the Second Temple culture, worship, and in Essene thought, Qumran community, is the second age, is the age of the Messiah, where everything is made right. But Paul actually sees sort of an overlap, that the New Age, this is a recap, right? I hope the New Age, the second age, has broken in. It's begun. It's begun. It's begun. However, we're still, the old age is still there partially. So we're at this special moment in time when the night is far gone, but the day is not yet broken. So we're on this overlap time. That's how special this moment is. But it's time to wake from sleep. It's time to stop living as if we're in darkness, but to live in the light. What happens in darkness, people will, well, that's when people are more willing. And that's what Paul's metaphor here is that when you're living in darkness, you're going to do bad things. You're going to do bad things. You're going to live the way people in darkness live. So, and he gives that wonderful list. He gives a list: reveling and drunkenness, debauchery and licentiousness, which is living outside of bounds of laws and morality, often talking about sexual immorality tied up in there, which some translations may just say sexual immorality, but licentiousness means more than just that. It's part of it, but it means more than just that. And living in quarreling and jealousy. Those are all things of the darkness. We're not supposed to be children of the darkness, Paul says. You're supposed to live in the light. You're supposed to live in the light and put on Christ rather than the clothing of darkness. Rather than the clothing of darkness, put on the armor of light is how it's often translated. It is a military word that is translated as armor of light. However, it's a military term that usually is talking about just the clothing of military, not so much the armor. Our armor, we might pick something different in our images. It's almost more like a uniform, the uniform that a soldier might wear today. And you need to not put on those things, but put on this new uniform, the clothing of light, because that fulfills the law. That fulfills the purpose of Torah, to be light and to be disciples of Jesus, and to put him on. And then there in the end, the last few words, right? And make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Now that word flesh for Paul, I hope we've said that before, does mean bodily desires, but it means so much more than that. It means so much more than that. And it means, living as a slave to those desires and to the flesh and to sin, rather than to the Spirit, which is indwelling, as Paul has said. Okay, friends. Whew. That was a pretty good chapter, pretty good lesson, I think, for today, and that's enough for today for sure. So, again, I pray that you felt your time was worthwhile today, that I didn't abuse your time. I pray that you learned or relearned something, that God has blessed you in something something we've read, something I've said. And as you go about your days today and every day, keep those eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open to what God is doing in your life and in the lives of those around you. When you see it, when you hear it, say, thank you, God, and then tell someone about it as well. All right, friends, until we meet again, be blessed, my friends. Be blessed. Bye.